All right, so let's get started up again. As I said, we should end up ending this lecture a little bit earlier than normal because there's not much left really to cover. But basically, again, just like with the previous forms, we'll talk here where we can say, okay, we track properties too. But let me not write through properties. Let me trying to underline and did not do so well. All right, so we can track our property information, and we can get different types of attributes, right, that our property may be tracking, right? And so what this will become is this will be things like a property table that has columns, right, including who is the staff person that manages it. What branch is it registered at? Right? Who is the owner? Right? Those types of things. This is all information that we're gaining from the existing documentation to say these are the types of things that we need to have data for. So anything that has a data value, what type of property is it? How many rooms are there? What's the rent, right? So anything that has a value, that's going to be a cell, right? It's going to be a cell, or at least one cell, maybe more, but at least one cell in a table, right? So what is probably what's going to end up happening is we'll have a property table with columns like type, rooms, rent. Address, we'll talk about how to store address. There are different ways that we can store address. We'll talk about that later. With the client registration form, you should be able to look through this and be able to understand what types of information is there. All right. Okay. Property listing. All right. Say we might have a list of properties that are maintained by a specific branch. Property viewing, we're tracking also when someone, a person, a client, views a property and what types of comments they put. Right. This is all information that we can learn from the existing documentation. A lease can tell us who it is, right, that's renting the property and what property it is that they are renting. Right. Now, what we will learn later is things like the name of our client, the address of our property might not go in a table for the lease. And we'll talk about why that is. We'll talk about why that is when we get into normalization. Okay. But this is information that's included as part of the documentation that we are seeing. Okay. So far, we've only looked at the forms, but there's other information that we could look at too, right? We could look at the mission statement, where the things in the mission statement, where nouns in the mission statement, right, such as the purpose of the Dream Home database system is to, where's my mouse? Okay, is to maintain the data that is used and generated to support the property rentals business for our clients and property owners, and to facilitate the cooperation and sharing of information between branches. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all the tables that we'll have. We may have other tables, right? In fact, we will have other tables, but at least from this mission statement, we can get an idea of the tables and in some cases the attributes, right? But mostly the tables that will exist in our final system, right? Or at least something that represents the tables. So we can also see that there's going to be maybe relationships that exist. Property rental business for our clients, so the property and the clients will have a relationship of who rents what properties. The owners table will have a relationship with the property because it's going to tell us who owns the different properties. Branches are involved, right? But that doesn't necessarily, this mission statement doesn't necessarily give us any information about what relationship branches might have with something else, but it at least tells us that branches are part of the system that we're looking at. All right. So we can also see some different objectives that will tell us how the system will be used. Right. So we can see some different objectives to maintain, enter, update, delete data on branches or staff or properties for rent. This will tell us the types of access that people will need, that some of our users will need on different things that will become our tables. So we know that someone that works with our system that we create is going to be able to enter, update, and remove information in branches, which suggests that there will be a branch table, which suggests that people will be able to enter information to the branch table, insert into. Some people will be able to update information. Some people will be able to remove, delete information from the branch table. We'll also need to be able to perform searches on all these things. So we'll need select, right? So again, this represents a table that we'll be able to select on to track the status of a property, right? Property again. To report on these things again is similar to searches, but it is making sure that we understand that we can write reports about this. So we'll probably need some type of view that includes information from some of these tables, maybe even combining some of these tables together. All right. One other thing that we'll gain from this information from documentation and from our other fact-finding techniques is learning what is our system boundary. Now, let me pull up the pen here, because since they did all this in gray, it can be a little bit confusing. But the boundary, well, this is hard to do with a mouse. Right, our system boundary would be this box here. Now, by saying this is our system boundary, we are not saying that this other stuff out here, like HR, human resources, or payroll, or marketing, right? We're not saying that that stuff's not important. Okay. What we are understanding is that it's not our job to design the system to include everything about the marketing part of this. Right? Or it's not our job. We're not worried about the payroll. We're not worried about making sure that people get their paychecks. That's not what our system is for. But now I think maybe one of you might think, or a few of you might think, but wait a second, Hojam, because we keep hearing you say, for the staff person, for example, that they have a salary column. Right? They have a salary column. But you tell me that payroll is not important, that I don't need to do with payroll. Isn't payroll and salary part of the payroll system? Yes and no, and here's why I'm saying that we have a salary column even though we're not designing the payroll. Okay, salary is information that our managers will need to know about the staff people. So it is connected to payroll. All right, payroll is how much someone is actually getting paid. It's about making sure that paychecks are issued, that the MOSH is given at a regular rate when it's supposed to, right? But that's not what we're designing. We're not designing the system to make sure that people get paid on time. But that doesn't mean that we don't need some information about payroll as part of our system. So because these two are connected, notice that staff and payroll is connected. It means that there will be some information that's going to be shared between these two functionalities, between these two aspects of our overall system, right? Our system is not designed, we're not designing the thing to make sure that people are getting paid on time. We're not designing the thing to make sure that marketing is done well, that newspapers are done well, right? Or to make sure that marketing's not just newspapers, it's advertising and things like that, right? Now, there is some advertising that's going on. So clearly for this example, they included newspaper, and we'll see that when we talk about listing properties in a newspaper. Right? But our job, again, is not to design all these other things outside of the boundary, but understanding that these things outside of the boundary are connected to our things inside of the boundary. Okay. So again, just like what I said with you guys for your group project, where I said you don't have to design a 100% working with security, with everything user interface for your group project. But I did want to see that you know that the user interface is part of how this thing would work in the long term. Okay. All right. So making sure we identify and understand. Making sure we identify and understand again, what is the boundary for our system? What are we designing? Right? What is our job? What are things that are related to what we're trying to design, right? We'll have a relationship, but it's not what we're designing, but there are connections between the two, right? Okay. All right. Again, the text is really small on the screen, so I encourage you to look at it in your own time, when you might be able to see it better. What are you saying there, William? Input output hours on 4 yeah, input output hours. I think what it's getting at with that is that there is some information that goes from one to another. So in other words, we're getting information from payroll about the staff for their salary amount. Or actually, I think that's probably coming from HR more than likely. But the payroll is getting information from staff because when that system issues the paycheck or pays them with their MOSH, it needs to know that information from the staff table. Like, what is their staff number? What is their salary? But notice that in the example that we have with the staff table, we have a staff ID, staff number, and we have their salary amount, which is a yearly salary. But what we don't have is information like what is their checking account number or their bank account information. We don't have anything like that. Okay, that would. All right. Back to here. This will tell us, okay, about the different tables that we might have: branches, staff, property owners, clients, viewings, leases, and newspapers. And it would say the different roles and what access they might need on that information. This can become the basis for how we design our views later. So, and notice, for example, that we have like a director role, a manager role, a supervisor role, and an assistant role defined. Notice that it's not like because you're the director, you get access to everything, right? You're the director, you get access to the things that you need to have access to. So the director gets query and report access on the branches, right, on all branches. The manager gets this on all branches and a single branch, specifically the branch that they are working with, right? What's another? Let me show an example where maybe, let's see. So for example, you have a supervisor and assistant. that have access on the viewings, on the branch viewings, but nobody above them has access, right? That might sound strange. It's like, wait a second. So the higher in the hierarchy person doesn't have access to things that people lower in the hierarchy do? Right. The whole point is that we allow these people to do the job they need to do. Yeah. So this would be like the rector or the dean, right? The engineering dean probably doesn't. They don't need to have access. Hopefully, they don't need to have access to this class's quiz and assignment grades in OBS, right? There's no reason for them to need to deal with grading your quizzes. They don't need to deal with grading your assignments, right? They don't need that access. And so what we might do is say, okay, we're not going to give them that access because they don't need it, right? Okay. So basically we have an understanding of who needs different types of access. And then also we can say, okay, so maybe in a more simplified version, not necessarily all the different types of access, but we're going to look at the main types of access, who uses what. So again, just like before, that property viewing thing where we had like a bunch of X's for supervisor and assistant, right, for all those different types of access on property viewing. Here again, right? All right. Notice here, okay, like the branch, only the director and manager are going to have access to branch information. So they'll only need to have access to things like where is the branch located, what is setting who the branch manager is if we have something like that. Okay. But this can be by having something like this can tell us what types, later when we start designing the system, we can start deciding, you know, what types of views we may need based on this, right? Based on this cross-reference here. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions for today? So like I said, we're going to end a lot sooner than normal because that completes our set of slides there. Does anyone have any questions or comments about what we've discussed today? Because it should help you be able to research and understand things for your group project of how to decide what type of information you want to maintain. Okay. All right. Well, let's end for today there then. All right. Have a good weekend, and I will see you guys on Wednesday of next week, Wednesday next afternoon. Good afternoon.